After his wife's death, a businessman tries to rebuild his life with his daughter and a new woman by his side. But behind the stepmother's smile lies a growing contempt for the defenseless child. When he witnesses his wife trying to abandon the girl, his illusion collapses. This beautiful story of overcoming and love interested you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. Continuing. Roderick Vascoville gazed at the ocean through the panoramic window of his office on the top floor of the most imposing business building in San Diego, California. The cloudy sky reflected the state of his soul, gray, heavy, with rays of light trying unsuccessfully to break through the dense clouds. It had been exactly 1 year since Beatrice, his wife, had passed away after a long battle with an illness. She had left him alone with little Laura, who was just 5 years old. The girl was the spitting image of her mother, the same brown curls, the same curious and intelligent gaze, the same smile that lit up any room. It was painful to look at Laura and see Beatrice reflected there, but it was also the greatest comfort Roderick could have. That child was his only reason to continue. The phone on the mahogany desk rang, pulling him from his thoughts. "Mr. Vascoville, Miss Camilla Dalton is here for the meeting," announced Tanya, his secretary. "Please send her in," he replied, adjusting his navy blue tie. Camilla entered with her usual elegant posture, wearing an impeccable white suit that contrasted with her dark hair. A brilliant economist, she had been working as a consultant for Vascoville Developments for 6 months, ever since she was hired to restructure the company's finances after Roderick's period of absence to care for his wife. "Good morning, Roderick," she smiled discreetly. "I've brought the numbers for the resort project at Englishman's Cove Beach. We have everything in place to start construction next quarter." During the meeting, Roderick noted how efficient Camilla was, precise in her analyses. There was a quiet strength in her, a confidence he admired. Since she started working more closely with him, Camilla had demonstrated not only professional competence, but also genuine attention to his concerns about Laura. "How is Laura doing?" she asked, as she put the spreadsheets back in her folder at the end of the presentation. "Is that nanny I recommended working out well?" "She is, thank you, but—" Roderick hesitated, running a hand through the grey hairs at his temples. "Mrs. Hilda is great, but I feel Laura needs more. She asks about her mother every day, and I don't know how to fill that void." Camilla observed him with understanding eyes. There was something in her gaze that conveyed security, as if she perfectly understood his pain. "Roderick, I know it might seem intrusive, but have you considered that perhaps Laura needs a permanent maternal figure? Someone who is there not just during the day, but in the early hours when she wakes up scared on weekends at school events." The suggestion hung in the air, not fully formulated, but clear enough. Roderick felt a lump in his throat. "Marry again?" It seemed like a betrayal to Beatrice. But Laura, his daughter, needed to grow up with the maternal love that he, alone, couldn't provide. 2 weeks later, after a series of business dinners that turned into personal conversations, Roderick invited Camilla to his home, a mansion in Coronado Cays with an ocean view. It was the first time he had brought anyone there since Beatrice's passing. Laura was playing in the garden when they arrived. Seeing her father, she ran towards him with open arms. Roderick lifted her into the air, smelling the scent of children's shampoo in his daughter's hair. "Laura, I want you to meet Camilla. She works with Daddy." The girl observed Camilla with curiosity, partially hiding behind her father's legs. Camilla knelt down to be at her height. "Hello, Laura. Your dad told me you love rag dolls. Look what I brought for you." From her bag, Camilla took out a handmade doll with a delicate floral dress and wool hair. Laura hesitated for a moment, then reached out her small hands to take the gift, a small smile forming on her face. "What do you say, Laura?" Roderick encouraged. "Thank you, Aunt Camilla," the little girl replied, hugging the doll. That afternoon was the first of many. Camilla began to frequent the house regularly. She always brought small gifts for Laura, helped her with preschool homework, and told bedtime stories. Gradually, the girl's initial resistance faded, and she began to show affection for Aunt Camilla. For Roderick, it was as if life gained color again. Observing Camilla with his daughter awakened feelings in him that he believed had been dormant forever. Within 3 months, he could no longer imagine life without her presence. It was on a summer night, while walking on the beach in front of the house, after Laura had already fallen asleep, that Roderick held Camilla's hand and asked the question he had been rehearsing for weeks. "Camilla, I know this might seem rushed, but life is too short for hesitation. Would you agree to marry me, not just for me but also for Laura? She needs a mother so much and you've been wonderful with her." Camilla's eyes shone under the moonlight. She squeezed his hand in hers. "Roderick, nothing would make me happier. I already love Laura as if she were my own daughter." The wedding took place 2 months later, in an intimate ceremony at the beach house. Laura was the flower girl, radiant in her little white dress carrying a basket with rose petals. To the guests, only family and close friends, it was the perfect image of a reconstructed family, an example of how love could flourish even after great losses. In the first few weeks after the wedding, life in the Vascoville mansion seemed to have found a new balance. Camilla naturally assumed the role of wife and stepmother. She redecorated some rooms in the house, hired a new staff and reorganized the family routine. Roderick was satisfied with the changes. His house was coming back to life, and Laura seemed to adapt well to the new reality. However, little by little, small cracks began to appear on the surface of that apparent harmony. Camilla became increasingly controlling regarding domestic matters. She questioned the decisions of Mrs. Hilda, the housekeeper who had served the family for years. She constantly changed Laura's mealtimes, her extracurricular activities, and even the toys she could or could not use. "We need to set boundaries. Roderick," Camilla would say when he questioned one of her decisions, "Laura needs discipline, a structured routine. Beatrice may have been more permissive, but now things are different." The mention of Beatrice's name always came with a subtle tone of criticism, as if the deceased wife had not been capable of raising her own daughter properly. Roderick felt uncomfortable with these insinuations, but avoided confrontations. "It's just the adaptation period," he told himself. "We'll soon find the balance." What Roderick didn't realize, engrossed in his real estate projects, was that when he wasn't present, Camilla's behavior towards Laura changed drastically. The sweet smile gave way to a severe expression. The affectionate words turned into dry orders, constant criticisms, small humiliations. "Didn't your mother teach you to sit properly at the table?" Camilla would say with a cutting voice as they ate lunch alone. "Oh, of course not." "She didn't have time, did she?" Laura lowered her head, trying to hold back tears. She had quickly learned that crying only made things worse. When her father was home, Camilla would revert to being the perfect stepmother. Patient, loving, attentive. The girl, confused by this dual behavior, didn't know how to react or to whom to turn. One Sunday morning, while they were having breakfast on the terrace, Laura accidentally knocked over a glass of orange juice, staining the freshly placed white tablecloth. "I'm sorry," the girl murmured, her eyes wide with fear. "It's okay." "Sweetheart," Roderick smiled, grabbing a napkin to clean it up. "Accidents happen." Camilla watched the scene with a tense smile on her lips. When Roderick stepped away to get more napkins, she leaned towards the girl and whispered so only Laura could hear, "This won't go unpunished. We'll talk about your carelessness later." Laura paled. She knew that tone well. She knew what it meant. Later, when they were alone, the punishment would come, being locked in her room without toys, sometimes without dinner. Chapter 2. The Hidden Face. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. At Vascoville Developments, Roderick became increasingly immersed in his work. The company expanded its operations beyond California, with new ventures in Oregon and New York City. Business trips became more frequent and prolonged, leaving Camilla as the absolute authority figure at home. During one of these trips, while Roderick was closing an important contract in Portland, Oregon, the situation at home reached a new level of tension. Laura, now 6 years old, had received a drawing at school that she had made for Mother's Day. Her teacher, Denise, knowing the girl's family situation, suggested she take the gift to Camilla. "Look, Laura brought something for you," Mrs. Hilda announced. Seeing Camilla arrive from work, Laura timidly extended the colorful paper. It was a simple, childlike drawing. 2 figures holding hands, one larger and one smaller, under a bright yellow sun. At the top of the sheet, in uneven letters, was written, "For my stepmom." Camilla stared at the drawing for a few moments, her face an unreadable mask. Then, with a swift movement, she crumpled the paper and threw it into the kitchen trash can. "I am not your stepmom, I am your mother," she said with a glacial voice. "And this drawing is horrible. You don't even know how to combine colors properly." Laura's lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. She had learned to swallow her tears. Mrs. Hilda, who was watching the scene from the kitchen door, felt a lump in her throat. It wasn't the first time she had witnessed Camilla's cruelty towards the girl, but never so explicitly. Mrs. Dalton, the housekeeper, intervened cautiously. "The girl made it with such affection. Don't interfere." "Hilda," Camilla cut her off with a look that could freeze the ocean. "Mind your own business, which does not include commenting on how I raise my daughter." That night, after Laura was put to bed, without dinner, as punishment for using the word stepmom, Camilla sat in the living room with a glass of wine. She carefully examined her perfectly manicured nails as she reflected. Mrs. Hilda was becoming a problem. The old housekeeper was too loyal to Beatrice's memory, observed too much, talked too much. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Roderick calling to say good night. "How are my princesses?" he asked, his voice tired but affectionate. "We're great, darling," Camilla replied, her tone instantly transforming into sweetness. "Laura is already asleep. We spent the afternoon doing homework and then watched a movie together. She asked about you. Tell her Daddy will be back in 2 days and will bring her a special gift." "Of course, my love. And speaking of gifts," Camilla paused calculatedly, "I've been thinking, Mrs. Hilda is getting too old to manage a house this size. I think we need to hire a younger, more efficient team." On the other end of the line, Roderick frowned. Mrs. Hilda had been with the family for decades. She had helped raise Beatrice, who was her niece, and was now doing the same with Laura. She was almost a grandmother to the girl. "Hilda is part of the family, Camilla. Laura adores her." "Precisely, darling. Laura is too attached to her, in a way that isn't healthy. She needs to understand that we, you and I, are her real family. Besides, I've noticed Hilda putting strange ideas into her head, talking a lot about Beatrice, showing old photos. The seed of doubt was planted." Roderick, always sensitive when it came to Laura's adjustment, showed concern. "We'll talk about it when I get back," he promised. "Perhaps you're right. Laura's well-being is what matters." 2 days later, Roderick returned to San Diego. Upon arriving home, he found Laura sitting quietly in a corner of the living room, flipping through a storybook. Seeing her father, her eyes briefly lit up, but she didn't run to hug him as she usually did. "What's wrong, Princess? Aren't you going to give Daddy a hug?" Laura quickly glanced at Camilla, who was watching the scene from the doorway before getting up and walking, not running, to her father. She hugged him briefly without her usual effusiveness. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" Roderick asked, intrigued by the change in behavior. "Yes, Daddy," Laura replied in a tone that seemed rehearsed. "I'm fine." During dinner, Roderick noticed other worrying signs. Laura ate in silence, her eyes fixed on her plate. She didn't recount school news as before, didn't ask questions, didn't smile. When Camilla gave her a more severe look, the girl flinched slightly. Later, after putting Laura to bed, Roderick found Camilla in their bedroom, applying her night cream in front of the dressing table mirror. "I noticed Laura is different. Did something happen while I was away?" Camilla sighed, placing the cream jar on the dressing table with a delicate movement. "Actually, yes. That's what I wanted to talk about. Laura had some episodes of misbehavior at school." The teacher called. It seems she pushed a classmate during recess. Roderick's eyes widened in disbelief. "Laura? Our Laura? Impossible. She's never been aggressive." "I was surprised too," Camilla continued, her voice sorrowful. But the teacher was clear. "It seems the girl called Laura motherless, and she reacted badly. I had to punish her, so she would understand the gravity of what she did." "I'm worried, Roderick. I think all this confusion with her identity, sometimes calling me mother, sometimes remembering Beatrice as her real mother, is affecting her behavior." Roderick's expression softened. So that was it. His daughter was confused, processing grief in ways he didn't fully understand. Perhaps Camilla was right about Mrs. Hilda over-reinforcing Beatrice's memory. "I'll call the teacher tomorrow," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I want to understand better what happened." "I've already handled everything, darling," Camilla hastened. "I spoke at length with Denise. I explained our situation, how we're working to give Laura emotional stability. She understood perfectly. In fact, Camilla hesitated, as if pondering whether she should continue. In fact, she suggested we consider professional help. A child psychologist. The idea that his daughter needed therapy hit Roderick like a punch. Had he failed so badly as a father? Hadn't he realized her suffering was so profound? If it's necessary, we'll find the best specialist, he agreed, his voice choked. Camilla smiled, approaching to hug him. I've already gone ahead. I scheduled an appointment for next week with Dr. Helen Miller. She's a cousin of my college colleague, very reputable. The following week, Roderick made sure to personally take Laura to her appointment with Dr. Helen. Camilla insisted on accompanying them, arguing that, as the girl's new mother, she should be present to provide important information. The office was welcoming, decorated in pastel tones, with toys and children's books available. Laura, initially tense, soon became interested in a dollhouse in the corner of the room. "Why don't you play for a bit while I talk to your parents?" suggested Dr. Helen, a woman in her 40s with a kind gaze behind her colorful framed glasses. While Laura was distracted with the toys, the psychologist conducted an initial interview with the couple. Roderick explained the situation, the premature loss of her mother, the new marriage, the recent changes in his daughter's behavior. Camilla complimented him, with a worried expression, mentioning the girl's episodes of aggression and identity confusion. "It's understandable that Laura is processing many complex emotions," Dr. Helen commented. "It would be good for me to have a few sessions alone with her to build a trusting relationship. I also suggest family sessions later." In the weeks that followed, Laura began attending the psychologist's office every Tuesday. Camilla always insisted on taking her, although Roderick tried to adjust his schedule to be present. Curiously, after each session, Camilla reported that Dr. Helen noted slow progress or even resistance on Laura's part. "She said Laura is creating a fantasy about you not liking her," Camilla recounted one night, while they were in bed. "Apparently it's a defense mechanism. To deal with the loss of her biological mother, she's rejecting me, imagining I'm a wicked witch from fairy tales." Roderick felt devastated. His daughter, his little Laura, feeling rejected to the point of creating such fantasies. More than ever, he dedicated himself to showing affection when he was home. However, Camilla always found ways to limit the time they spent together. There was homework to do, bath time, unavoidable commitments. One afternoon, returning early from the office, Roderick decided to surprise Laura. He stopped at a bookstore and bought the new volume of the children's book series she loved. Upon arriving home, he entered silently, wanting to surprise her. That's when he heard the sound. A muffled sob, almost inaudible, coming from the TV room. He approached slowly and saw through the half-open door a scene that left him paralyzed. Laura was kneeling in the center of the room, with several toys scattered around her. Camilla, standing before her, held a teddy bear worn by time, Mr. Hugs, a gift from Beatrice when Laura was still a baby. "How many times do I need to tell you that this old rag doesn't come into the living room anymore?" "It's unsanitary and ridiculous," Camilla said, in a voice Roderick had never heard before. Cutting, icy. "Big girls don't need teddy bears. Or maybe you're not a big girl. Maybe you're just a crybaby who doesn't deserve to be in our family." Laura sobbed, trying to reach for the teddy bear. "Please, Mom, please," she begged. "I am not your mother," Camilla hissed, throwing the toy on the floor. "Your mother is dead. Dead and buried. And you know why? Because she didn't love you enough to stay. She preferred to leave rather than put up with a crybaby and ill-behaved girl like you." Roderick felt as if the world had stopped. The cruelty of the words, the evident pleasure on Camilla's face as she uttered them, the pain in his daughter's eyes. Everything was etched into his mind like a burning iron. He wanted to rush forward, interrupt that torment, but something held him back. A primitive instinct to observe, to fully understand the extent of what was happening in his home when he wasn't present. "Now clean up this mess," Camilla ordered, lightly kicking one of the toys. "And I don't want to hear another peep. If your father comes home and finds you crying, you know what will happen, don't you?" Laura nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her small hands. "You'll say I was naughty and deserve to be punished." "Exactly. And I'll tell Dr. Helen that you're having another one of your episodes. Nobody believes lying children. Laura, remember that." Chapter 3. Shadows and Revelations. That night, Roderick couldn't sleep. Lying beside Camilla, who was breathing softly in deep sleep, he relived the scene he had witnessed hours earlier. How had he not noticed? How had he been so blind? The signs were all there. The fear in Laura's eyes, her growing silence, the way she flinched in her stepmother's presence. He had attributed everything to the grieving process, to the natural confusion of a child who had lost her mother and was trying to adapt to a new family reality. But the truth was much darker. Camilla, the woman he had chosen to be his daughter's new mother, was the source of the little girl's suffering. During dinner, he maintained an appearance of normalcy. He talked to Camilla about work, smiled when necessary, feigned interest in the stories she told. Internally, however, he was formulating a plan. He needed to protect Laura, but intelligently. If he confronted Camilla directly, she would deny everything, likely find a way to distort the facts, to make him seem like the villain of the story. In the morning, while they were having coffee, Roderick casually announced, "I called the office earlier. I have to go to Laguna Beach, California, to personally check on the progress of the resort. It seems we're having environmental licensing problems." Camilla looked up from her coffee cup, visibly annoyed. "Today? But we have the Children's Institute charity dinner. You promised you'd go with me." "I know, and I'm sorry, but I can't postpone this visit. The mayor will be on site today. It's a unique opportunity to expedite the paperwork." He smiled, trying to appear genuinely regretful. "You'll shine at the event even without me. And you can take Helen, your friend from the club. She always enjoys these events." Camilla didn't hide her disappointment, but eventually agreed. The charity dinner was too important to miss. It was her chance to strengthen connections with the business and political elite of California. When Camilla left for her daily commitments, Roderick called Laura for a talk. The girl came hesitantly, as if expecting a scolding. "Princess, how about we go fishing today?" "Just the two of us." Laura's eyes widened in surprise. "But, Mom," she said, "I have piano lessons this afternoon." "I've already spoken to her, it's all right," Roderick lied, feeling a pang of guilt that quickly dissipated. "We'll take the boat and spend the afternoon at the lake. Like we used to, remember?" A shy smile, the first genuine one he had seen in months, lit up his daughter's face. Later, as he packed a small backpack with snacks and fishing gear, Roderick made an important call. "Ronald, I need an urgent favor. It's about that land in Seaview Point, California, the old St. Christopher's Ranch." "Yes, exactly. I need you to get everything ready for an inspection this afternoon." "And Ronald, don't mention it to anyone in the office, especially Camilla. It's a surprise I'm preparing." Ronald Sterling was his childhood friend and current operations manager at Vascoville Developments. If there was anyone Roderick fully trusted, it was him. At 2 p.m., Roderick and Laura set off in the car towards the north of the island. The girl was silent in the back seat, hugging Mr. Huggs, which Roderick had discreetly rescued from the closet where Camilla had hidden him. "Daddy." "Mum will be angry if she knows I brought Mr. Huggs," Laura commented, her voice small. Roderick adjusted the rearview mirror to see his daughter's face. "Don't worry about that now, Princess. Today is our special day, just the two of us. And Mr. Huggs is very welcome on our adventure." Instead of heading to the lake where they usually fished, Roderick took the road to the mainland towards Seaview Point. Laura didn't question the change of plans, probably relieved to be away from home and Camilla. The land of the old St. Christopher's Ranch was in a secluded area, overlooking the sea, surrounded by preserved forest. It was one of Roderick's most ambitious projects, transforming the historic property into a sustainable resort, maintaining the original architecture and integrating it with nature. At the moment, however, the place was practically deserted, with only a caretaker living in the restored farmhouse. "I thought we were going fishing," Laura commented when they parked near the main house. "We are. There's a beautiful beach just down there. But first I want to show you a special place." They walked to a natural viewpoint, from where they could see the entire bay. The sea wind ruffled Laura's hair and she breathed the fresh air with visible delight. "Your mother, Beatrice, loved this place," Roderick said, after a moment of contemplative silence. "It was here that I proposed to her." Laura looked at her father with curiosity. "Mommy used to come here." Yes, in fact, she was the one who discovered this ranch. She had a project to create a school here for children from the region, a place where they could learn in contact with nature. It was the first time in a long time that Roderick had spoken openly about Beatrice to his daughter. Since Camilla had entered their lives, any mention of his late wife had become a taboo, something to be avoided so as not to hinder Laura's adjustment. "Mommy was a teacher, wasn't she?" Laura asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and longing. "Yes, biology. She loved teaching about plants, animals, the balance of nature. She used to say that children learn best when they can touch, feel, explore the real world." Roderick smiled at the memory. "You take after her. Always curious, always wanting to understand how things work." Laura smiled, a genuine smile Roderick hadn't seen in ages. It was as if a floodgate had opened, allowing long-repressed feelings and memories to finally flow. "I miss her, Daddy," the girl confessed softly. "Sometimes I try to remember her face, but it's getting hard." Roderick felt a tightening in his chest. He sat on a rock and pulled his daughter onto his lap. "I have something to show you." From his wallet he took out a folded photograph, Beatrice smiling with baby Laura in her arms. For a long time, it had been too painful to look at that image. Now, however, he understood that it was wrong to deprive Laura of these memories. "She was beautiful," Laura whispered, gently touching her mother's face in the photograph. "And she looks happy." She was very happy. "Especially with you, Princess. You were the greatest love of her life." Silent tears began to stream down the girl's face. They weren't tears of pain but of relief, as if for the first time she could truly feel the loss instead of repressing it. "Mom," Camilla said that Mommy didn't really love me, that she left because I'm difficult." The cruelty of those words hit Roderick like lightning. He hugged his daughter tightly, fighting his own indignation to keep his voice calm. "That's a terrible lie, Laura. Your mother loved you more than anything in the world. She fought very, very hard to stay with us. The illness that took her was stronger, but until her last day she only thought of you, of what your life would be like, of how much she wanted to see you grow up." Laura sobbed, clinging to her father. Roderick allowed her to cry, to release all the pain accumulated in recent months. When the sobs finally subsided, he wiped his daughter's tears with his fingertips. "Laura, I need you to tell me everything. How does Camilla treat you when we're alone? What does she say? What does she do? I know it's hard to talk about this, but it's very important." The girl hesitated, fear returning to her eyes. "She'll get angry. She'll say I'm lying." "No, Princess. She will never hurt you again, I promise. But I need to know everything so I can protect you." Slowly, little by little, Laura began to speak. She talked about the punishments without reason, the humiliations, the cruel words. She spoke of how she was forbidden to mention Beatrice, how her mother's drawings and memories were destroyed. She recounted the nights without dinner, the constant threats, the fear of being abandoned as punishment for being a bad girl. Every word was like a knife in Roderick's heart. How had he not noticed? How had he let his own daughter suffer so much for so long in his own home? "Even Dr. Helen doesn't believe me," Laura concluded, disheartened. "Mom Camilla always talks to her first, and then the doctor just asks me why I'm making up stories." The mention of the psychologist made Roderick frown. Helen Miller, the supposed child psychology specialist, cousin of Camilla's colleague, had she also been deceived by Camilla, or was she complicit in that cruel farce? "Laura, are you never alone with Dr. Helen? Is Camilla always present at the appointments?" "No. Mom Camilla waits in the outer room. But she always talks to the doctor before and after. And once I saw them meeting at the mall, laughing together like friends." The pieces began to fit. Camilla had orchestrated everything meticulously, from the choice of the psychologist to the narrative of the problematic child, whom no one would believe. As they returned to the car, Roderick made a decision. They would not return home that night, nor perhaps the next day. He needed time and distance to plan his next steps. "Let's do something different, Princess. How about we spend the night here at the ranch? I know Mr. Jair, the caretaker, would prepare the guest room for us, and we can buy some clothes in town, have a picnic on the beach, watch the stars." Laura's eyes sparkled at the idea of the unexpected adventure. "And Mom Camilla? She'll be worried. I'll call her and explain that we had to extend our inspection visit. Don't worry." While Laura explored the ranch house garden accompanied by the old caretaker and his wife, Roderick made two important calls. The first to Camilla was brief and direct. "Camilla, I'm in Seaview Point with Laura. We had a setback with the licensing and I'll need to spend the night here. Enjoy the charity dinner, don't worry about us." Camilla's voice on the other end of the line sounded irritated, but contained. "Roderick, this is completely irresponsible. Laura has school tomorrow, she has her appointment with Dr. Helen. You can't just decide these things without consulting me." "It's already decided," he replied with a firmness that surprised them both. "I'll call tomorrow to inform you of our return." Before she could protest further, Roderick hung up. The second call was to Ronald. "Ronald, I need another favor. I want you to discreetly hire a private investigator, someone trustworthy, professional, who has no connection to our social circle. And I need this to be absolutely between us." "Has something serious happened, Roderick?" his friend asked, concerned by the urgent tone. "Yes, but I can't go into details now. I can only say it involves Laura's safety." The night at the ranch was like a balm for father and daughter. They had a delicious homemade meal prepared by Mrs. Teresa, the caretaker's wife. Afterwards, they sat on the porch of the house to watch the starry sky. Laura, more relaxed than Roderick had seen her in months, fell asleep on her father's lap, hugging Mr. Hugs. As he put her to bed, in the simply decorated guest room, Roderick made a silent promise. No one would hurt his daughter again. Never again. The next morning, as they had coffee on the sunny porch, Roderick's cell phone rang. It was Ronald. "I found the perfect person for the job. Monica Crawford, a former detective now working as a private investigator. Extremely discreet and efficient. She can meet you today if it's urgent." "It's urgent," Roderick confirmed. "Schedule it for 2 in the afternoon at the cafe of the San Diego Museum of Art." They bought new clothes for Laura in the small town near the ranch, a floral dress, sandals, even a colorful backpack with school supplies. The girl seemed reborn away from Camilla's constant oppression. She laughed, talked, asked about everything, like the curious and lively child she had always been. At precisely 2 p.m., Roderick met Monica Crawford at the agreed location. Laura had stayed with Mrs. Teresa, who had promised to teach her how to make homemade cookies, an activity that had excited her. Monica was a woman of about 40, with short grey hair and keen eyes behind discreet framed glasses. Her handshake was firm, professional. Ronald explained that the matter involves your daughter's safety. "Mr. Vascoville, I'm here to help in any way necessary." Roderick recounted everything: Camilla's abusive behavior, the lies, the manipulation, even the suspicion about the complicity of the psychologist Helen Miller. "I need concrete evidence," he explained, "something that cannot be disputed or distorted." Camilla is very skilled at manipulating perceptions, at creating narratives that favor her. Monica listened carefully, making occasional notes. "I understand the situation, Mr. Vascoville, and I agree that we need undeniable evidence. I suggest a 3-pronged approach. Investigate Camilla Dalton's past, monitor her current activities, and verify the true nature of her relationship with Dr. Helen Miller." "How long will this take?" "For a thorough job, 2 weeks at least. But I can provide preliminary reports as I gather relevant information." Roderick nodded. He was willing to pay any price, wait as long as necessary, to ensure Laura's protection. "In the meantime," Monica continued, "I strongly recommend that you keep your daughter away from Ms. Dalton. From what you've described, the psychological abuse is severe and continuous. Distance is the best protection right now. That will be complicated. I can't just disappear with Laura without raising suspicions. In that case, I suggest you return to San Diego, but find ways to never leave the girl alone with her stepmother. Hire a trustworthy nanny, reorganize your schedule to be more present, enroll her in extracurricular activities that keep her out of the house. The goal is to minimize opportunities for abuse while we gather the necessary evidence." The plan made sense. It would be difficult, requiring constant vigilance, but it was feasible. As they said goodbye, Monica made one last observation. "Mr. Vascoville, prepare for potentially disturbing discoveries. In my experience, people who psychologically abuse children rarely start this behavior out of nowhere. There's usually a pattern, a history." Roderick felt a chill run down his spine. What else was there to discover about the woman he had chosen to be his daughter's mother? Then Chapter 4, The Plan. The return to San Diego was fraught with tension. During the car ride, Laura was unusually quiet, looking out the window at the coastal highway landscapes. As they approached the city, her anxiety became visible, her small hands tightly clutching Mr. Hugg's, her eyes watchful, her breathing quickening. "It's okay, Princess," Roderick assured her, watching her in the rearview mirror. "Remember what we talked about? You won't be alone with Camilla." "I promise." Laura nodded without much conviction. The trust that had begun to blossom during their 2 days at the ranch seemed to wither as they neared home. Before reaching the mansion in Coronado Cays, Roderick made an important stop. He parked in front of a 2-story yellow house with a well-maintained garden and a discreet sign, "Portwell Dance Studio." "We're going to meet someone special," he announced, opening the car door for Laura. They were greeted by Iara Portwell, a black woman in her 40s with an elegant ballerina's posture and a welcoming smile. "So this is the famous Laura," she said, bending down to the girl's level. "Your father told me you love to dance. Is that true?" Laura looked at her father, confused. They had never talked about dancing before. "Actually," Roderick intervened, "I thought Laura could benefit from dance lessons, to gain confidence, motor coordination. And you came highly recommended, Iara." The woman smiled, understanding the situation. "Well, we have a beginner's class starting tomorrow, from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. every weekday." She looked at Laura gently. "Would you like to try it, dear? You don't need any experience. We start with the basics and it's a lot of fun." After a visit to the studio's facilities, spacious mirrored rooms with gleaming wooden floors, Laura seemed genuinely interested. Iara's warm presence and the prospect of a completely new activity, away from home, were appealing. On the way to the mansion, Roderick explained the true purpose of the dance classes. "Iara is a trusted friend. She knows you need a safe place to be during the afternoons. After school, Mrs. Hilda will take you directly to the studio, and I'll pick you up every day at 5 p.m. That way, you won't have to be alone with Camilla." Laura's eyes widened in comprehension. "So, I don't need to have lessons with Dr. Helen anymore?" "No, dear. No Dr. Helen for now." Upon arriving home, they found Camilla in the living room, with a tense expression and crossed arms. Her gaze alternated between Roderick and Laura, calculating her approach. "Finally," she said, keeping her voice controlled, though her eyes revealed irritation. "You were unreachable. I was worried." Roderick helped Laura take her new backpack to her room before facing his wife. "Sorry for the worry, but it was an urgent work matter. And I took the opportunity to spend some quality time with Laura. She really needs my presence." Camilla narrowed her eyes, noticing the subtle change in her husband's attitude. "What's that in her hand?" she asked, pointing to Mr. Hugg's, which Laura was still holding. "Her teddy bear. It was stored in the closet. I put it away for a reason, Roderick. We've talked about how Laura needs to detach from these childish objects. Dr. Helen even commented on how this excessive attachment is problematic." Roderick took a deep breath, controlling the anger that threatened to show. "I think we're being too rigid with her. She's just a child, Camilla, and that teddy bear was a gift from her mother." The mention of Beatrice made Camilla's face harden momentarily, but she quickly regained her composure. "All right, if you think that's better." She forced a comprehensive smile. "I'm just trying to do what's best for her, darling. Speaking of which, Dr. Helen's appointment tomorrow—" "We'll need to cancel," Roderick interrupted. "I've enrolled Laura in dance classes, from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. every day. I thought physical activity would be good for her." "You made that decision without consulting me?" Camilla asked, her anger now more evident. "I'm her mother, Roderick. We should make these decisions together." "You're right. I should have consulted you." He maintained a conciliatory tone, knowing he needed to diffuse the situation, but it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. "We passed by the dance school on the way. Laura was interested, and there was a spot in the class starting tomorrow." Camilla didn't seem convinced, but she had enough experience to know when to temporarily retreat. "Well, let's try it then. I can take her after school. Actually, I've already arranged it with Mrs. Hilda. That way, you don't have to change your work schedule." The following weeks were an exercise in constant vigilance for Roderick. He completely reorganized his professional routine, delegating responsibilities, cancelling trips and holding meetings via video conference whenever possible. His priority was to ensure that Laura was never alone with Camilla. The dynamic in the Vascoville mansion became tense, with forced smiles and artificial conversations. Camilla, noticing the change in her husband's attitude, became more cautious, more calculating. Her attempts to isolate Laura were thwarted by the new routine imposed by Roderick. Her irritation grew, but she kept it under control, especially in the presence of staff or visitors. Meanwhile, Monica Crawford worked diligently behind the scenes. Twice a week, Roderick met with her in discreet locations for updates. "What have you found out?" "About her past?" Roderick asked at one of these meetings, 3 weeks after the investigation began. Monica opened a folder with methodically organized documents. "Camilla Dalton is not who she says she is," she began with a grave expression. "To start, that's not her real name. She was born Christina Miller in Portland, Oregon. She legally changed her name 10 years ago after an incident." Roderick felt a chill down his spine. What kind of incident? "She worked as a governess for the Alton family in Portland, a couple and an 8-year-old daughter. The child's mother died in a car accident. Subsequently, Christina, now Camilla, married the widower. The similarity to his own situation was too disturbing to be a coincidence. What happened to them?" "The marriage lasted only 6 months. Mr. Alton filed for divorce and a restraining order against her. The allegations included psychological abuse against his stepdaughter." Monica hesitated briefly. 3 months later, he dropped the accusations and withdrew the divorce petition. He paid Camilla a substantial sum for her to leave their lives, and the agreement included absolute confidentiality. Why would he drop the accusations? Apparently, Camilla had compromising information about his business. She threatened to expose everything if he proceeded with the lawsuit. It was cheaper and less risky for his reputation to simply pay to get rid of her. Roderick closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the impact of the revelation. It wasn't the first time Camilla had done this. There was a pattern exactly as Monica had suspected. And Dr. Helen Miller. Bingo, Monica smiled humorlessly. Helen Miller is Christina Miller's cousin. They grew up together in Portland, Oregon. The psychologist who supposedly diagnosed problems in Laura is in fact trained in marketing, not psychology. The office is legitimate, but it belongs to another professional who rents it to Helen a few hours a week. Each new revelation was more shocking than the last. Roderick felt nauseated at the thought that he had entrusted his daughter's mental health to an imposter. "There's more," Monica continued. "I managed to access some recordings from your home's security system. The hallway and living room cameras captured interactions between Camilla and Laura when you weren't present. The material is disturbing." She handed Roderick a USB drive. "This contains videos from the last 10 days. No audio, unfortunately, but the body language and facial expressions are quite revealing." Monica paused, her professional gaze softening briefly. "Mr. Vascoville, as a former detective, I've seen many cases of child abuse. What your daughter is suffering is real and traumatic. With the evidence we've gathered so far, you have a solid basis for a divorce petition and sole custody. I suggest you consult a family law attorney as quickly as possible." On the way back home, Roderick stopped at a deserted park and connected the USB drive to his laptop. The videos confirmed his worst fears. Even without audio, the scenes were appalling. Camilla pushing Laura against the wall, pointing her finger in her face, tearing drawings from her hands, forcing her to kneel in the corner of the room for long periods. In one of the most disturbing videos, Camilla held Mr. Huggs above Laura's head, as if threatening to destroy him, while the girl cried, pleading. With hands trembling in anger and guilt, Roderick closed the laptop. It was time to act. The next day, he met with Regina Anderson, one of the most respected family law attorneys in the state. "I want a divorce and sole custody of my daughter," he declared after explaining the entire situation, "and I want it fast. Every day that passes is one more day of suffering for Laura." Regina carefully examined the evidence presented, the videos, the investigation reports on Camilla's past, the false identity of Dr. Helen, the documents from the Alton case that Monica had obtained. "You have a very strong case, Mr. Vascoville," she agreed. "But I must warn you, processes like this are rarely simple or quick, especially when they involve high-profile individuals like yourselves. Ms. Dalton will likely contest everything, try to manipulate public opinion, and may even counterattack with false allegations against you. I'm prepared for that. There's also the issue of Laura's immediate safety. Even with the process underway, your wife will technically still have the right to contact the child until a court decision, which can take months. This reality was unacceptable to Roderick. He couldn't allow Laura to remain exposed to Camilla's abusive behavior for so long. Is there any way to obtain an emergency protection order? Something that keeps her away from Laura while the process runs? With this evidence, we can request an injunction, but for that we would need to formally present the case, which would immediately alert Ms. Dalton. There's a risk that she might take drastic measures when cornered. Regina was right, and this put Roderick in an agonizing dilemma. Starting the legal process meant declaring open war against Camilla, which could put Laura at even greater risk in the short term. What if I just leave home with my daughter? He asked, desperate for an immediate solution. We can stay at the ranch in Seaview Point until everything is resolved. The lawyer shook her head emphatically. That would be interpreted as flight or even parental kidnapping. It would seriously jeopardize your case. The law presumes that both parents have equal rights until a court decision to the contrary. No, Mr. Vascoville, we need to do this legally, even if it takes longer. After a long discussion, they agreed on a plan of action. Regina would prepare all the documentation for the divorce and the request for sole custody, including the injunction request. Meanwhile, Roderick would maintain Laura's protection routine, ensuring she was never alone with her stepmother. On the agreed date, all documents would be presented simultaneously, minimizing the time between Camilla's notification and the implementation of protection measures. I'll need some more specific evidence, Regina explained. Particularly, Mrs. Hilda's testimony would be extremely valuable. As a long-time employee who witnessed Camilla's behavior, she would be a crucial witness. This was complicated. Mrs. Hilda would certainly testify in favor of Laura, but Roderick feared for her. Camilla was vindictive, and the housekeeper could become a target. We'll also need an independent psychological report on Laura, Regina continued, done by a legitimate professional to counter the pseudo-diagnosis of the false Dr. Helen. In the days that followed, Roderick executed each part of the plan meticulously. He arranged for Laura to be discreetly evaluated by a renowned child psychologist under the pretext of a routine school assessment. He spoke privately with Mrs. Hilda, who promptly agreed to testify. I knew something was wrong, the elderly woman confessed, with tears in her eyes. I saw the fear in the little one's eyes, but that woman, she's clever, Mr. Vascoville. She always took care not to leave visible marks, and when I tried to protect the girl, she threatened to fire me, said no one would believe an old, confused woman like me. Only 1 week remained until the planned date to file the legal proceedings. Roderick lived in a constant state of alert. Divided between work, caring for Laura, and monitoring Camilla, who clearly suspected something was happening. You're different. Roderick, she commented one night as they prepared for bed. Distant, secretive. Is there something you want to tell me? I'm just stressed with work, he lied, avoiding looking directly at her. The Laguna Beach project is having serious licensing problems. Camilla approached, sliding her arms around his neck in a gesture that might once have seemed affectionate, but now caused him repulsion. Perhaps we need a vacation. The three of us, a trip abroad, to reconnect as a family. What do you think? The idea of leaving the country with Camilla, of being in unknown territory with Laura under the same roof as her, was terrifying. Let's think about that after the project is underway. He deflected, subtly pulling away. Camilla's gaze hardened momentarily, but she soon regained her calculated smile. Of course, darling. No rush. Chapter 5. The Trap. On Wednesday morning, 3 days before the scheduled date to file the legal proceedings, Roderick received a call that would change everything. It was Monica Crawford, her voice filled with urgency. Mr. Vascoville, we need to talk immediately. I've discovered something that cannot wait. They met an hour later, in a discreet cafe in downtown San Diego. Monica seemed more tense than usual, her vigilant eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Camilla knows, she said without preamble as soon as Roderick sat down. She found out about the investigation. Roderick's stomach plummeted. How? I'm not sure, but she hired a private investigator too. Paul Reynolds, a former police officer with a questionable reputation. He's been following me for the past few days, and last night someone broke into my office. They only took one file, yours. The news was devastating. If Camilla knew about the investigation, she certainly also knew the evidence gathered against her, which meant she knew her time was running out. We need to act now, Roderick concluded, his heart racing. We can't wait until Monday. I'll call Regina and ask her to file the processes today. There's something worse, Monica interrupted, lowering her voice even further. I found records of 2 airline tickets purchased last night on Camilla's personal credit card. For Buenos Aires, departing tomorrow morning, 1 adult, 1 child. Roderick felt his blood run cold. She intends to flee with Laura. It seems so. And once out of the country, it would be much harder to recover your daughter, even with all the evidence we have. But Laura is at school now, and then goes straight to the dance studio. Camilla has no way of getting her without me knowing. Unless she has a plan for that, Monica pondered. I suggest you pick Laura up from school immediately and keep her under your constant surveillance until the legal measures are in place. Roderick was already on his feet, grabbing his car keys. Before leaving, he made 2 urgent calls, one to Regina Anderson, his lawyer, asking her to expedite the processes for that very day. The other to Mrs. Hilda, instructing her to remain at Laura's school until he arrived. As he hung up, he noticed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Seconds later, his phone vibrated again. It was the same number. Hello, he answered, already hurrying to the parking lot. Mr. Vascoville. The female voice on the other end sounded agitated. This is Marianne Cooper, coordinator of Rainbow Academy. It's about your daughter, Laura. Roderick's heart skipped a beat. What happened? Your wife was here about 20 minutes ago. She said Laura had an emergency medical appointment and withdrew her from school. I thought it was a bit strange, as we hadn't received any prior notice, but since she's the mother... Roderick barely managed to thank her before hanging up. Panic seized him as he ran to the car, Monica on his heels. She picked Laura up from school. Said it was for a medical appointment. I'll track her car, Monica said, already dialing on her cell phone. I put a tracking device under her SUV 2 weeks ago, as a precaution. And I'll alert my contacts at airports and bus stations. If she tries to leave the city, we'll know. As he drove frantically towards the mansion, Roderick tried to call Camilla several times. All calls went to voicemail. He then tried Mrs. Hilda's number. The housekeeper answered, breathless. Sir, the madam took the girl. I arrived at school just as they were leaving. I tried to stop her, said you had asked me to wait, but she yelled at me, said I was fired. The little one looked scared, sir. I tried to follow the car, but I lost sight of it. You did what you could. Hilda, go back home and wait for me there. The mansion in Coronado Cays was silent when Roderick arrived, accompanied by Monica. No sign of Camilla's SUV in the garage, or the Porsche she also occasionally drove. Mrs. Hilda greeted them at the door, her face marked by worry. I checked the whole house, sir. They're not here, but the girl's room. It seems they took clothes, her teddy bear, some personal belongings. Roderick ran to the master bedroom. Several of Camilla's expensive dresses had disappeared, along with her most valuable jewelry. In the closet, he found the safe open and empty. The passports, cash, and important documents they kept there were gone. She was planning this, he murmured, feeling betrayed and at the same time furious with himself for not having acted sooner. She must have suspected I found out about her past, about Helen. Monica's phone rang. She answered quickly and spoke for a few moments in a low voice before turning to Roderick. We've located the tracker signal. Her SUV is stopped on Coastal Highway 101, near the access to the Redwood Creek area. Why would she stop there? Roderick asked, confused. Coastal Highway 101 was the main access road to the north of the island, but that specific point had nothing relevant, just dense forest on one side and the sea on the other. It could be a tracker malfunction or... Monica hesitated. She might have discovered the device and removed it. The second possibility was alarming. If Camilla had discovered the tracker, it meant she was one step ahead of them, extremely aware of being monitored. We need to go there, Roderick decided. Maybe we'll find a clue. As they headed to the location, Regina Anderson called with news. We managed to file the divorce and sole custody petition with all the evidence. The duty judge has already issued a restraining order, prohibiting Camilla from approaching Laura or leaving the city with her. The police are being notified at this moment. It was a significant victory, but Roderick knew that a legal document would not stop Camilla. She had already violated his trust, kidnapped his own stepdaughter. She would not hesitate to defy a court order. Upon arriving at the designated point on Coastal Highway 101, they found Camilla's black SUV parked in a shoulder area. The vehicle was empty, locked, and seemingly intact. She left the car here on purpose, Monica observed, examining the surroundings. She probably had another vehicle waiting. One we couldn't track. Or took a taxi, an Uber, Roderick suggested. But where to? The answer came moments later, when Roderick's cell phone vibrated with a message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made it clear who the sender was. If you want to see your precious daughter again, come alone to the old St. Christopher's Ranch. You have 1 hour. No police, no amateur detective, and bring the original documents for all properties. I know they're in the office safe. Come prepared to sign transfers. Roderick felt a mix of relief and terror. Relief at knowing where Laura was, terror at what Camilla might be doing to her at that moment. It's an obvious trap, Monica warned after reading the message. She wants your assets and probably plans to get rid of you afterward. We need to call the police and risk Laura's safety. No. Roderick's determination was unshakable. I'll follow her instructions. You can call for backup, but keep your distance until I'm sure Laura is safe. Against Monica's strong objections, Roderick drove to the Vascoville Development's office downtown. There, in the built-in safe behind a painting on the wall, he kept the original documents of his properties: mansions, land, company shares, an estate estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars. He put everything in a folder and returned to the car, refusing to answer Regina's and Monica's insistent calls. The road to Seaview Point was strangely empty on that rainy afternoon. The dark clouds made the sky as gloomy as Roderick's thoughts. As he approached the ranch entrance, the rain intensified, turning the dirt road into slippery mud. The property seemed deserted. No sign of the caretaker Jair or his wife Teresa. No visible vehicle other than Camilla's silver Porsche, parked in front of the main house. Roderick stopped beside it, took the folder with the documents, and stepped out into the rain, not bothering to protect himself. The front door was unlocked. He entered, shouting, "Laura! Camilla, I'm here!" Silence. Only the sound of heavy rain against the windows answered his calls. He moved cautiously through the house, checking each room on the ground floor. Nothing. He went upstairs, his heart pounding in his chest. The second-floor hallway was dark, with several closed doors on both sides. "Laura?" he called again, less loudly now, tense from the oppressive atmosphere. A muffled sound came from behind the last door on the right. Roderick ran to it and threw it open. What he saw left him paralyzed. Laura was sitting in a chair in the center of the room, her small hands tied behind her back with a silk scarf, her eyes red from crying. Beside her, Camilla smiled with disturbing calm, one hand resting casually on the girl's shoulder. "Daddy!" Laura exclaimed, trying to get up, but being prevented by the pressure of Camilla's hand. "You actually came," Camilla observed with false surprise. "And you brought what I asked for. Good boy." Roderick took a step forward, but Camilla immediately increased the pressure on Laura's shoulder, making the girl whimper in pain. "Not so fast. Stay where you are." Her smile disappeared, replaced by a calculating expression. "Put the folder on the bed and step back." Roderick obeyed, his eyes never leaving his daughter. "Are you okay, Princess?" he asked softly. Laura nodded, though her lower lip trembled. "She said we were going on a trip, Daddy, that you didn't love us anymore." "I said it was a lie. And it is a lie, sweetheart." "I love you more than anything." Camilla laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "How touching." "Really, Roderick? You should have been an actor, not a businessman. You have a talent for drama." She released Laura's shoulder and walked to the bed, keeping the girl in her sight. She opened the folder and quickly examined the documents, nodding with satisfaction. "Perfect. Now there are some transfers already prepared in the blue envelope. All you need to do is sign." "Why this, Camilla?" Roderick asked, trying to buy time. "Why all this theater?" "The money? You already have more than enough." It's never enough, she shrugged, and I deserved every penny. Do you know how much work it takes to charm a rich widower like you? To gain trust, eliminate competition, keep up appearances? She pointed to Laura. To pretend I can stand this insufferable child? Roderick felt anger boil within him, but he remained controlled. He needed to distract her, find an opening. Was it like this with Alton too? In Portland? Camilla's eyes widened slightly, before narrowing into slits of fury. I see you've been digging into my past. It doesn't matter now. Sign the papers, Roderick. And then, what happens to me and Laura after I sign? Laura and I will take a flight to Buenos Aires tomorrow morning. From there, we'll go to Europe. As for you, she smiled coldly, let's just say you'll have too many problems to worry about chasing us. This confirmed Roderick's fears. Camilla did not plan to let him leave that ranch alive, and if she managed to flee with Laura abroad, using her false documents and the resources she would extract from him, it would be almost impossible to recover his daughter. I won't let you take my daughter, he declared, his voice taking on a firmness that surprised even himself. You're not in a position to make demands. Camilla opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out something that made Roderick freeze. A small pistol. This simplifies things, doesn't it? Sign the papers, Roderick. Now. With the gun pointed at him, Roderick had no choice but to slowly approach the bed. He picked up the transfer documents and quickly examined them. Camilla had thought of everything. Transfers of properties, shares, bank accounts, all to offshore companies whose beneficiaries he couldn't identify. You won't succeed, he said, as he pretended to read the documents more carefully. I have an entire legal team. They'll contest these transfers as soon as they find out. By the time they find out, it will be too late. Sign now, my patience is running out. Roderick looked at Laura, who was watching the scene with wide eyes full of fear. He needed to give his daughter a signal, prepare her for what he was about to do. Laura, he said calmly, remember what I always tell you when we go swimming. When a big wave comes, what do we do? The girl blinked, processing the cryptic message. Then she nodded slightly. We dive under, she replied softly. Exactly, princess. We dive under. What is this conversation? Camilla snapped, approaching with the gun still pointed. Enough stalling. Sign now or... Her ultimatum was interrupted by a deafening crash from downstairs, the sound of a door being violently forced open. Camilla instinctively turned towards the noise, and that was the moment Roderick needed. Now, Laura! Dive, he shouted, lunging at Camilla. Laura, even with her hands tied, instantly threw herself to the floor, rolling under the bed as her father had taught her during her swimming lessons. When the wave is too big, dive under, don't try to face it. The impact of Roderick's body against Camilla caught her off guard. Both fell to the floor, struggling for control of the weapon. Roderick, with more physical strength, managed to grab her wrist, forcing the gun away from both of them. Up here! He shouted, hoping whoever had broken down the door, the police, he hoped, could hear him. Camilla fought like a cornered beast, scratching, biting, striking blows wherever she could. She managed to hit Roderick in the face with her free hand, making him recoil momentarily. It was enough for her to partially regain control of the gun, pointing it in his direction. At that exact moment, the bedroom door was flung open. Monica Crawford entered, gun drawn, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. Police! Drop the weapon! Shouted one of the officers. Camilla, seeing herself surrounded, did the only thing she could in her disturbed mind. She spun quickly, aiming towards the bed where Laura was hiding. It was her last mistake. Before she could pull the trigger, 3 shots echoed simultaneously in the room. Monica and the 2 police officers had fired at the same time, hitting Camilla in the arm and shoulder, making her fall heavily to the floor, the pistol sliding away from her hands. Laura! Roderick cried, rushing under the bed from where he pulled out his trembling daughter. He quickly untied her and hugged her with all his might, his tears mixing with hers. It's all right now, princess. It's all right. As the police handcuffed Camilla and called an ambulance, Monica approached Roderick and Laura. You ignored all my instructions, she said, holstering her weapon. It was reckless, risky, and... Thank you, Roderick interrupted sincerely, for not obeying me and coming after me anyway. Monica smiled slightly. I knew you would. That's why I put a tracker on your car, too. And I notified local police before I left. Chapter 6. The trial. The following weeks passed in a blur for Roderick and Laura. The arrest of Camilla Dalton, or Christina Miller, as her original documents revealed, became one of the most talked about topics in California. The sensationalist press exploited every sordid detail of the story: the false identity, the previous marriage under similar circumstances, the fraud of the supposed psychologist, the plan to flee with Laura, the attempted extortion under threat. To protect his daughter from this excessive exposure, Roderick temporarily moved with her to the ranch in Seaview Point. There, away from curious eyes and headlines, Laura slowly began her recovery process. Now accompanied by a true child psychologist, Dr. Martha Turner, a trauma specialist. "What worries me most is the guilt," Dr. Martha confided to Roderick after a few sessions with Laura. "She blames herself for what happened. She thinks that if she had been a better girl, her stepmother would have liked her, and none of this would have happened." Roderick closed his eyes, feeling the weight of this revelation. Despite having been the one deceived, manipulated by Camilla, it was his little daughter who bore the burden of guilt. How can we help her overcome this? Time, consistency, lots of love and reaffirmation that none of this was her fault. And something else. Dr. Martha hesitated briefly. "Laura needs closure. The trauma remains open, as long as she doesn't fully understand what happened and why." "The trial," Roderick concluded, understanding the direction of the conversation. "Do you think she should participate?" "Not directly, of course. She's too young to testify or even be present at the hearings, but she'll need to understand the process, to know that justice was done, that Camilla faced consequences for her actions." While Laura worked through her trauma with the psychologist, Roderick faced his own demons. Guilt consumed him, for not having noticed the signs earlier, for having brought Camilla into their lives, for having failed to protect his daughter when she needed him most. On a particularly difficult afternoon, after a long session with his own therapist, Roderick found Mrs. Hilda on the ranch's terrace, contemplating the sea. "How is the little one today?" asked the housekeeper, who had insisted on accompanying them in their temporary exile. "Better, I think. She smiled while we played on the beach this morning." Roderick sat beside the elderly woman. "Hilda, how did I not notice? How could I have been so blind?" The old woman placed her wrinkled hand over his in a comforting gesture. "You were vulnerable, sir. The pain of loss, the worry about Laura. That woman knew exactly how to exploit that. It was her plan from the beginning. Even so, I should have seen, I should have—" "What matters is that you saw in time," Hilda interrupted with surprising firmness. "Many men in your position would have closed their eyes, denied the truth, chosen the easy way out. But you faced reality when it presented itself, and you saved your daughter. That's what matters now." Mrs. Hilda's words, while not eliminating his guilt, offered a different perspective. Yes, he had failed in many ways, but when it truly mattered, when Laura needed him most, he had been there. 3 months after the incident at the ranch, Camilla's trial finally began. She faced multiple charges: fraud, forgery of documents, conspiracy, child abuse, attempted extortion, kidnapping, attempted murder. Despite the gravity of the accusations and the compelling evidence, she pleaded not guilty to all charges. "It's a standard strategy," explained Regina Anderson, who continued to represent Roderick, now only in the criminal case, as the divorce had been granted almost immediately, given the circumstances. "She will try to distort the narrative, present herself as a victim, question the legality of the evidence collected by the private investigator." "Does she have any chance?" Roderick asked, concerned. "Honestly? Very little. The evidence is overwhelming, and her desperate attempt at the ranch sealed her fate. The police testified. We have the security system recordings, the fake Dr. Helen's office, the documents from the Alton case that Monica obtained. It's practically a closed case. Even so, the trial dragged on for weeks. Camilla's defense strategy was clear: attack Roderick's credibility, present him as an unscrupulous businessman who had manipulated evidence to get rid of his wife and keep all the assets. They even insinuated that Laura had been instructed to lie about the abuse. The press, initially sympathetic to Roderick and Laura, began to divide as the defense planted seeds of doubt. Some sensationalist outlets even published headlines like, "The Real Victim," with photos of Camilla appearing fragile in court. It was at this critical moment that Roderick received an unexpected visit to his temporary office at the ranch. Ronald Sterling, his friend and operations manager, brought with him a woman of approximately 40 years old, who introduced herself as Anna Claire Alton. "I recognized her name in the news," Ronald explained. "Camilla Dalton, formerly Christina Miller, ex-wife of Richard Alton from Portland, Oregon. I remembered that my cousin works for the same company as Richard. I made some calls and, well, Anna Claire really wanted to talk to you." The woman sat down, visibly nervous, her hands clasped in her lap. "My brother Richard doesn't like to talk about this," she began, her voice hesitant. "The confidentiality agreement, the fear of scandal. But when I saw the news about your daughter, about what that woman did, I couldn't stay silent. My niece Juliana went through the same torment." Anna Claire then recounted in detail what Monica had only been able to outline in her investigation. How Christina Miller had entered Richard Alton's life after the tragedy that took his wife. How she had charmed the widower and gradually isolated Juliana. How the systematic psychological abuse began. The same threats, the same pattern. Richard realized in time, like you. But when he tried to report her, she retaliated with information about some irregularities in his business. He chose to protect his reputation, paid for her to disappear. I always disagreed with that decision. Told him she would do it again to another family, another child. Tears now streamed down the woman's face. If we had reported her back then, maybe your daughter would never have gone through this. I'm so sorry. I really am. Roderick absorbed the story in silence, feeling a mix of emotions, relief at having another confirmation of Camilla's pattern, anger at Richard Alton for choosing the easy way out, compassion for the guilt Anna Claire clearly carried. "Are you willing to testify?" he finally asked. "Even if it exposes your brother, brings up things he tried to hide?" Anna Claire took a deep breath, wiping her tears. "That's why I'm here. Richard doesn't know yet. He'll probably be furious, but it's the right thing to do. Juliana is still in therapy, 7 years later. I can't let this woman escape again." Anna Claire's testimony was the turning point in the trial. Although Camilla's defense desperately tried to prevent her participation, claiming irrelevance or trying to invoke the confidentiality agreement signed by Richard, the judge allowed her to speak. Her emotional and detailed testimony established Camilla's pattern of behavior irrefutably. Then came other devastating testimonies. Mrs. Hilda describing the abuses she witnessed. The real Dr. Helen, indignant that her name and office were used in the farce. Ayara Portwell, recounting the fear she observed in Laura during dance classes. And finally Monica Crawford, methodically presenting all the evidence she had gathered. The final blow came when the prosecution displayed the security videos from the mansion, showing Camilla humiliating and terrorizing Laura when she thought no one was watching. There was no audio, but the images were explicit enough to elicit gasps of horror from the audience. Camilla, who until then had maintained a cold and calculating composure, lost control when she saw the images displayed on the big screen. She stood up abruptly, screaming, "She deserved it!" That spoiled child, always crying for her dead mother, always in the way. Why did he love her more than me? Why? Guards were needed to restrain her and temporarily remove her from the courtroom. Her lawyer, visibly embarrassed, requested a break to compose his client, but the damage was done. That outburst, more than any evidence presented, had sealed her fate. On the day of the verdict, Roderick took Laura to the city. Not to attend the trial, of course, but so she could understand that the nightmare had truly ended. "What will happen to her, Daddy?" Laura asked as they ate ice cream in a square near the courthouse, waiting for the news. "The judge will decide today, Princess, but she'll probably be in prison for a long time, to think about what she did and never be able to hurt another child." "Is she sorry?" The question caught Roderick off guard. It was so typical of Laura. Even after all she had suffered, she could still think of the possibility of remorse, of redemption. "I don't know, sweetheart. Some people do bad things and then realize they were wrong. They feel very sorry for what they did. Others?" He hesitated, searching for appropriate words. "Other people are so hurt inside, so full of anger, that they can't see when they're hurting others. They only think about their own pain." Laura absorbed the explanation in silence, licking her ice cream thoughtfully. "What was Mommy Beatrice like?" she asked after a moment. Roderick smiled, grateful for the change of subject to something more luminous. "Your mother was pure light, Laura. She lit up any room she entered. She had a laugh that made everyone smile with her, even those who were sad. She was intelligent, dedicated to her students, passionate about nature." He paused, sweet memories flooding his mind. "And she loved you more than anything in the world. From the moment she knew she was pregnant, you became the center of her universe." "I wish I remembered more of her," Laura said, her voice small. "I have many photos, videos, letters she wrote. I kept everything. When we go home, we can look at them together. And Mrs. Hilda knew your mother since she was little. She has thousands of stories to tell." Roderick's phone vibrated. It was Regina, informing him that the jury had returned with the verdict. "Guilty on all counts," she announced, her voice filled with professional satisfaction. "Sentencing will be determined next week, but we're talking about many years in prison, Roderick. It's over." He hung up and looked at Laura, who was watching his face anxiously. "It's over, Princess. Justice has been served." Laura didn't smile, didn't show joy or relief. She just nodded gravely, as if processing information too complex for her age. "Can we go home now, Daddy? Our real home, not the ranch." The mansion in Coronado Cays had been completely renovated during the months they were away. All the furniture chosen by Camilla was replaced, the wall colors changed, the rooms redesigned. Nothing should remind them of the dark period they had gone through. Laura's room, especially, had been transformed, now with walls in soft shades of green and yellow, decorated with nature motifs that recalled Beatrice's passion for biology. An entire wall was dedicated to photos of Beatrice with her daughter, carefully selected and framed. When Laura saw her new room, her eyes filled with tears. "It's like having a piece of Mommy back," she whispered. Readjustment was not easy. Despite the physical changes in the house, the memories remained. Laura still had occasional nightmares, still startled at sudden noises, still showed insecurity in certain situations. Dr. Martha continued to see her regularly, now in her office in San Diego. "Trauma doesn't disappear overnight," the psychologist explained to Roderick, "but Laura is an incredibly resilient child. With continuous support, she will overcome this and grow stronger." And so it was. Day after day, week after week, small signs of progress emerged. Laura returned to school, a new school where no one knew her recent history. She made friends, got involved in extracurricular activities, continued dance classes with Yara, which had become a true passion. Camilla's sentence was announced without fanfare, 18 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 12 years. Additionally, she was ordered to return all funds received during the marriage and to pay substantial compensation to Laura for moral and psychological damages. The money would be held in a trust fund until the girl turned 18. News of the sentence arrived while Roderick and Laura were participating in a cooking class with Mrs. Hilda, a new Sunday tradition they had established. The housekeeper taught recipes Beatrice loved, telling stories of the deceased while they prepared the dishes. "Is he satisfied with the decision, sir?" Hilda asked discreetly, while Laura was distracted measuring ingredients. "It's not about satisfaction," Roderick replied thoughtfully. "It's more a feeling of closure, of justice served. Now we can truly move forward." Moving forward didn't mean forgetting. On the contrary, Roderick made sure to keep Beatrice's memory alive in Laura's life. They regularly visited the memorial he had created for her in the gardens of the ranch in Seaview Point. There, under a golden flowering tree, Beatrice's favorite tree, they had symbolically buried some of her belongings and installed a bench where they could sit and talk, as if she were listening. 6 months after the trial, on a sunny Sunday at the ranch, Laura surprised her father with an unexpected request. "Daddy, I want to do a project, like the one Mommy wanted to do here at the ranch." Roderick looked at his daughter with curiosity. She was sitting on the bench under the golden flowering tree, drawing in her notebook with intense concentration. "What project, Princess?" "A school, for children to learn about nature, animals, plants, like Mommy used to teach." Roderick's heart filled with emotion. Laura had not only survived the trauma, she was transforming her pain into something beautiful, something that honored her mother's memory. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Where do you want to start?" Laura's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. as she explained her vision: an outdoor school, with gardens, vegetable patches, trails through the preserved forest, simple laboratories where children could conduct experiments, a place where learning would be an adventure, not an obligation. "Can we call it Beatrice Vascoville School?" she asked timidly. "Nothing would make me happier," Roderick replied, hugging his daughter. In the following weeks, the school project became a healthy obsession for both of them. They consulted educators, biologists, architects specialized in sustainable construction. Laura, despite her young age, actively participated in all meetings, expressing her ideas with surprising eloquence. "She has the same sparkle in her eyes that Beatrice had when she talked about her projects," Mrs. Hilda commented. After observing Laura animatedly explaining to an architect how she imagined the outdoor classrooms, the project began to take concrete shape. The old ranch headquarters would be preserved and adapted to house administration and some basic facilities. The rest would be built in harmony with nature, using sustainable techniques and local materials. On a particularly productive afternoon, while reviewing preliminary plans with the architectural team, Roderick received a call from Ronald. "Did you see the news?" his friend asked without preamble. "I'm busy with the school project." "What happened?" "It's about Camilla. She attempted suicide in prison." Roderick moved away from the meeting table so as not to be overheard. "She survived?" "Yes, but she's in serious condition. Doctors are cautious about the prognosis." The news left him with conflicting feelings. He wished suffering upon no one, not even Camilla, despite all the harm she had caused. At the same time, he felt distant, as if it no longer directly affected him. "Thanks for letting me know, Ronald. Keep me informed, please." Returning to the table, he found Laura looking at him with curiosity. "Is everything all right, Daddy?" "Yes, Princess. Just a work matter." He decided not to share the news about Camilla. There was no reason to reopen wounds that were beginning to heal. In the following days, Roderick discreetly monitored the news. Camilla had been transferred to a penitentiary hospital, where she remained in critical condition. A week later, Ronald informed him that she had woken up, but presented significant neurological sequelae due to lack of cerebral oxygenation. "Doctors say she may never fully recover her speech or motor coordination," Ronald explained. "She will be transferred to a medical wing of the prison once she is stable." Roderick absorbed the information in silence. It was a tragic end, even for someone who had caused so much pain. Part of him felt reluctant compassion. Another part, more practical, recognized that the sequelae meant Camilla would never again pose a threat to Laura, even if she ever obtained parole. He chose not to delve further into the matter. The Camilla chapter was closed in their lives. The present was too bright, the future too promising for them to remain trapped in the dark past. The Beatrice Vascoville School was officially inaugurated a year later, in an emotional ceremony that brought together local authorities, educators, environmentalists, and, of course, the community of Seaview Point. Laura, now 8 years old, cut the ribbon alongside her father, wearing a small lab coat embroidered with the school's logo, a stylized golden flowering tree. "This is a dream that began with my wife Beatrice," Roderick spoke to the audience. "A dream of education connected to nature, of learning through discovery, of respect for the environment. We couldn't imagine a more fitting tribute than to turn her vision into reality." What he didn't mention, but all those close to the family knew, was that the true driving force behind the realization of that dream had been Laura. Her determination, her clear vision of what she wanted, her insistence on every detail, from the pedagogical curriculum to the colors of the furniture, had brought the project to life. The school started with 2 pilot classes, serving children from the local community. The plan was to gradually expand, eventually offering scholarships to low-income students from across the region. Beatrice would have approved. On the night after the inauguration, Roderick found Laura sitting on the bench under the golden flowering tree, despite the late hour. The full moon illuminated the garden, creating dancing shadows among the tree's leaves. "Can't sleep, Princess?" he asked, sitting beside her. Laura shook her head, her eyes fixed on the stars above. "I was thinking about Mommy. Would she be proud?" "More than we can imagine," Roderick replied, putting his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "She always said you would accomplish extraordinary things, even when you were just a baby. She saw something special in you, an inner strength, a light of your own. Laura leaned her head on her father's shoulder, sighing contentedly. Sometimes I feel like she's here, you know. Not in a scary way, but comfortable. Like she's watching over us, even if she can't physically be here. I feel that too, Roderick confessed, especially here in this place she loved so much. They sat in silence for some time, just appreciating each other's presence and the feeling of peace they had finally found. "Daddy," Laura called sleepily. "Yes, Princess. We're okay now, aren't we?" "Really okay?" Roderick kissed the top of his daughter's head, feeling a deep gratitude for her resilience, for the second chance they had both received. "Yes, Laura. We're okay." Really okay. And they were. Not perfect, not without scars, not without painful memories, but whole, healed in the essential parts, ready to build a future where love and Beatrice's memory would always be the most solid foundation. A family different from what they had imagined, but still a true family. Chapter 7. New Beginnings. 5 years had passed since the inauguration of the Beatrice Vascoville School. What began as a small educational project had grown to become a national reference in environmental education. From 2 pilot classes, the school now served over 200 students, from early childhood education to elementary school, with a long waiting list of families eager to enroll their children. Laura, now 13, had blossomed in ways that surprised everyone who knew her story. The shy and frightened girl had given way to a confident, eloquent teenager, passionate about environmental and social causes. The traumas of the past had not completely disappeared. Dr. Martha had explained that some emotional wounds leave permanent scars. But Laura had learned to transform her experience into empathy for others, into a genuine desire to make a difference in the world. One Saturday morning, as Laura and Roderick had breakfast on the porch of the ranch house, where they now spent most weekends, the teenager surprised her father with an unexpected question. "Dad, have you ever thought about getting married again?" Roderick almost choked on his coffee. In the 8 years since his divorce from Camilla, the topic of relationships had been practically taboo between them. Not by explicit prohibition, but by a tacit agreement to avoid painful memories. "Why that question now?" he replied, buying time to organize his thoughts. Laura shrugged, trying to appear casual, although the sparkle in her eyes revealed there was more behind the question. "I don't know. You haven't dated anyone since." "Well, you know. And it's been so long, so I thought maybe you were feeling lonely." Roderick smiled, touched by his daughter's concern. It was true that he hadn't been seriously involved with anyone since Camilla. There had been a few casual dates over the years, some possibilities that hadn't evolved into anything concrete. Part of him feared repeating past mistakes. Another part had simply prioritized Laura and the school project above any romantic consideration. "I'm not alone, Laura. I have you, I have our friends, I have the school. I have a full life." Laura rolled her eyes in a typically teenage way. "Dad, you know what I mean. I'm not talking about being literally alone. I'm talking about, you know, love." His daughter's frankness surprised him. It was easy to forget how much she had grown, how she was no longer the little girl who needed constant protection. Love. "It's complicated," he finally replied. "After everything that happened, I think I became a little more cautious. But I'm not closed off to the possibility, if that's what worries you." Laura nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. Then, as if casually, she commented, "You know Professor Diane?" "The science teacher?" "Of course I know. What about her?" "Sarge, she always asks about you, and she gets all red when she talks about Mr. Vascoville." Laura made air quotes with her fingers, imitating a more formal tone of voice. "And you also act differently when she's around. You get all my proper." Roderick felt his face flush. Diane Montgomery was the pedagogical coordinator and science teacher at the school, a brilliant woman in her 30s with a genuine passion for environmental education. Over the past 2 years, they had worked together on various projects, developing a mutual respect that, Roderick had to admit, sometimes seemed to carry something more. "Professor Diane is a colleague. Laura, a professional I admire very much." "Uh-huh. Sure," the teenager replied with a mischievous smile. "That's why you fix your hair every time before meetings with her." "I do not," Roderick protested, though he knew that in fact he paid more attention to his appearance when he knew he would meet Diane. "You do too," Laura laughed, clearly enjoying her father's discomfort. "And it's okay, you know? She's cool. Really cool, actually. And super smart." Roderick shook his head, surrendering to his daughter's good-humored interrogation. "Are you trying to set me up with Professor Diane? Is that really what's happening here? Set up is a strong word. Let's say I'm facilitating things. You two are so slow." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching. It was Diane, who had agreed to spend Saturday with them to discuss the expansion of the school's ecological trails program. Laura quickly got up with a mischievous smile. "Look, Professor Diane is here." "What a coincidence!" She grabbed her backpack, slinging it over her shoulder. "I promised Mrs. Teresa I'd help with the seedlings in the community garden. You two can discuss the project alone, can't you? Maybe have lunch together afterward? There's that new restaurant on the beach." Before Roderick could protest, Laura was already running towards the garden, shouting over her shoulder, "Oh, Dad! Fix your hair!" Diane approached the porch, wearing simple jeans and a green blouse, her brown hair tied in an unpretentious bun. She carried a folder full of documents and smiled when she saw Roderick. "Good morning. Is Laura running away from me?" she asked, watching the teenager quickly move away. "Not from you, Roderick," replied, unconsciously running a hand through his hair. "I think she's giving us space." "Space?" Diane repeated, confused. "It's a long story. Coffee." Over the following months, the space created by Laura became a recurring joke between Roderick and Diane, as their relationship gradually evolved from colleagues to close friends, and then to something more. The teenager made no effort to hide her approval, often inventing excuses to leave them alone, or making subtle comments about how they made a beautiful couple. "Your daughter is not discreet at all," Diane commented one night, as they walked along the beach after dinner at the ranch house. Laura had conveniently remembered that she needed to finish some schoolwork and had retired shortly after dessert. Discretion was never her strong suit, Roderick laughed. "But her persistence." "She has plenty of that." Diane stopped walking, turning to face the ocean. The moon reflected on the calm waters, creating a silvery path over the gentle waves. "She worries about you," she observed. "She wants you to be happy." "I know, and I am happy. More than I ever imagined possible again." Diane looked at him, her expression suddenly serious. "May I ask something personal, Roderick?" "Of course. Are you still afraid to next get deeply involved with someone after everything that happened?" The question hit the core of the doubts that still occasionally haunted Roderick. He reflected for a moment before answering. "It's not exactly fear. It's more caution, concern, not just for me, but mainly for Laura. She's been through so much. Laura is no longer a defenseless child, Roderick. She's strong, resilient, incredibly mature for her age. And from what I can tell, she's practically begging you to move on." Roderick smiled, acknowledging the truth in those words. "And you?" he asked, turning the question. "Are you ready to get involved with a man with considerable baggage? With a teenage daughter who, despite being adorable, has very strong opinions about everything?" Diane smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I'm here, aren't I? Even with your daughter blatantly conspiring to get us together, even with all the complicated history, even knowing that you sometimes still talk to your late wife under that golden flowering tree." She took his hand. "I'm here because I chose to be, because I believe it's worth it." That night, for the first time in many years, Roderick allowed himself to believe that a truly romantic new chapter could begin in his life. The relationship between Roderick and Diane blossomed naturally, without haste, with mutual respect as a solid foundation. Laura, of course, was radiant with the development, although she tried, without much success, to feign surprise when they finally officially announced they were dating. "I knew it," she exclaimed, jumping for joy in the living room of the Coronado Cays mansion. "I knew it from the start. You two are perfect together." Diane, who spent more and more time with them, integrated into the family dynamic with surprising naturalness. Unlike Camilla, she never tried to replace Beatrice or erase her memory. On the contrary, she showed genuine interest in stories about the deceased, recognizing her permanent importance in Laura and Roderick's lives. "I think she would have approved of you," Laura commented one afternoon, as she helped Diane plant flowers in the school garden. "My mom, I mean. You two would have a lot in common. Diane looked at the teenager with affection, touched by the implicit acceptance in those words. That means a lot to me. Laura, really a lot. Life continued its natural flow. The Beatrice Vascoville School expanded even further, now including a sustainability research center that hosted university students and researchers from all over the country. Laura, increasingly involved in the school's activities, decided she would follow in her biological mother's footsteps and study biology, with a focus on environmental conservation. One autumn afternoon, 2 years after their relationship began, Roderick took Diane to the ranch's viewpoint, the same spot where he had proposed to Beatrice so many years ago, and where he later revealed the truth about Camilla to Laura. "This place has stories," Diane commented, as she admired the sunset over the bay. "Good and bad." "It's true," Roderick agreed, feeling a peace he had fought so hard to find. "But I think it's time to create new stories here." "Our stories?" He took a small blue velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a white gold ring with a central emerald, Diane's favorite stone, which reflected her passion for nature. "Diane Montgomery, you have transformed my life and Laura's in ways I never imagined possible. You brought light back, you brought hope, you brought joy. I don't want to imagine a future without you by our side. Will you marry me?" Diane's eyes filled with tears as she nodded vigorously, unable to form words for a moment. "Yes," she finally managed to say. "Yes, Roderick. Say 1,000 times yes." When they told Laura the news, they were met not with surprise, but with a triumphant exclamation. "Finally! You two are so slow." The wedding was celebrated 6 months later, in an intimate ceremony held in the school gardens, under the golden flowering tree that had now grown lush and majestic. Laura was the maid of honor, radiant in a sky-blue dress she had chosen herself, carrying a bouquet of native flowers grown in the school garden. During the ceremony, a special moment was reserved to honor Beatrice. Laura read a poem she had written, thanking her biological mother for the love she left as a legacy, for the inspiration that continued to guide their paths. There was no sadness in that moment, only gratitude and the certainty that love, in all its forms, remains beyond circumstances, beyond time, even beyond life. The reception was lively, with live music, food prepared by the local community, and much laughter. In the middle of the party, Roderick found a moment to step away briefly and observe the scene. Diane animatedly chatting with school teachers, Laura dancing with friends, Mrs. Hilda, now with completely white hair, proudly supervising the distribution of sweets, Ronald raising a toast with other longtime friends. It was a different kind of happiness than he had known before. Not the explosion of youthful joy of his first marriage, nor the false security he had briefly felt with Camilla. It was something deeper, more solid, a happiness built on foundations of loss, learning, growth, and above all, truth. Diane found him in that contemplative moment, sliding her arm through his. "Thinking of running away from your own wedding party, Mr. Vascoville?" she teased. "Never," he replied, pulling her close. "Just admiring the view. Our family." "Our family," she repeated, savoring the words. "I like the sound of that." Laura approached, slightly breathless from dancing so much. "You can't hide here. The party's for you, you know." Roderick and Diane laughed, allowing themselves to be dragged back to the celebration by the enthusiastic teenager. Later that night, when the guests had left and Laura was already sleeping exhausted at the ranch house, Roderick and Diane sat on the porch, gazing at the starry sky. The future stretched out before them, not perfectly delineated, but promising, a path they would build together, day after day. "Do you know what I admire most about you? About Laura, about everything you've built here?" Diane asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "What?" "The ability to start over, to transform pain into purpose, tragedy into opportunity, loss into legacy." Roderick reflected on those words, recognizing their profound truth. The journey had not been easy. There had been moments of despair, doubt, almost giving up. But here they were, on the other side of the storm, stronger, wiser, more capable of appreciating the light, precisely because they had known the darkness. "I think that's what life teaches us, if we're willing to learn," he finally replied, "that the end of one story isn't the end of all stories, that there's always a new chapter to be written, if we have the courage to turn the page." Diane rested her head on his shoulder, and together they watched the moon rise in the sky, illuminating the path ahead. A path of new beginnings, new possibilities, new loves. A path that, despite all its twists and obstacles, was worth traveling.